Today, we are diving into Mark Manson's huge bestseller, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. This is a book that basically takes everything we think we know about happiness and flips it completely upside down. And it all starts by pointing out a villain that you probably know way too well. Manson calls it the feedback loop from hell, and oh man, it's that horrible, vicious cycle. You know the one. You feel bad, and then you start feeling bad about feeling bad. You get anxious, and then you get anxious because you're anxious. You're angry, and then you get mad at yourself for even being angry in the first place. If that just hit a little too close to home, well, you are definitely not alone. Manson makes the case that this is a full-blown cultural epidemic. We've somehow managed to turn our own emotions into weapons against ourselves, making a bad moment a million times worse. And let's be real, our super-connected world is just pouring gasoline on this fire. I mean, your social media feed is a never-ending highlight reel of everyone else's seemingly perfect life, right? So it's no wonder you start to feel like something's wrong with you when you're just, trying to survive a Tuesday. And this really gets to the core paradox of it all. The very act of chasing positivity, that constant desire to feel better, well, it just reinforces the fact that you don't feel good right now. It's a chase that starts from a feeling of lack. The philosopher Alan Watts actually had a name for this. He called it the backwards law. And it's this incredibly powerful, super counterintuitive idea that the harder you try to grab onto something positive, the faster it slips right through your fingers. And you can see exactly how this backwards law plays out in real life. If you desperately want to be rich, you just end up feeling poor and unworthy. If you desperately want to be loved, you feel lonelier than ever. Your focus on what you don't have becomes your entire reality. So the big question is, how do you break this crazy cycle? Well, Manson points us to a really unlikely hero, a guy named Charles Bukowski, a man who was, by just about every standard, a complete and total train wreck. I mean, for decades, Bukowski was practically the dictionary definition of a failure. He spent 30 years in this haze of alcohol, drowning in rejection slips from publishers, all while stuck in a dead-end job at the post office. Then, at 50 years old, he finally got a shot. One small publisher decided to take a risk on him, and Bukowski, knowing this was probably his only chance, he quit his job. He even famously wrote to the editor, "I have decided to starve." And get this, he actually became a best-selling author, sold millions of books. But here's the kicker. This is the epitaph on his tombstone. Not never give up, not dream big, just don't try. And here's the whole point. Bukowski's success wasn't about finally overcoming his failures. No, it was about being totally 100% comfortable with them. He accepted that he was a loser, and he wrote about it with this raw, unflinching honesty. He just didn't give a single fuck about what success was supposed to look like. Okay, so this brings us right to the heart of the book. What does Manson actually mean by not giving a fuck? Because yeah, it's a lot more nuanced than it sounds. First off, it is absolutely not about being indifferent to everything. Manson says indifferent people are just lame and scared. No, this is about being comfortable with being different. It's not about ignoring everything. It's about consciously choosing what actually deserves your attention and your energy. This subtle art really comes down to 3 key principles. Number 1, be okay with being different. Number 2, find something you care about so much that adversity and challenges just become background noise. And number 3, realize that you are always giving a fuck about something, so your only real choice is deciding what that's going to be. So how does this all come together into something we can actually use? Well, it means we have to completely reframe our entire relationship with problems and with happiness itself. See, Manson argues that our whole pursuit of happiness is totally flawed because life is, and always will be, just one problem after another. Real happiness isn't the absence of problems, it's the joy you find in solving the problems you actually choose to have. And to deliver this, let's say, blunt truth, Manson invents this amazing superhero called Disappointment Panda. And his message is simple. Problems never go away. They just get upgraded. You don't want a life without problems. You want a life full of good problems. A perfect and honestly kind of painful example of this is the story of the guitarist Dave Mustaine. He gets kicked out of his band right as they're about to sign a huge record deal. So, totally driven by revenge, he goes and forms the band Megadeth, and they become a legendary multi-platinum act, selling over 25 million albums, a massive success by any standard. But his old band? Yeah, that was Metallica, one of the biggest rock bands in history. And that's the tragedy of his story. Because Mustaine chose the wrong metric for his life, the impossible goal of being bigger than Metallica, his own incredible achievements always felt like a failure to him. He chose a struggle that was guaranteed to make him miserable. So what's the ultimate payoff for embracing this whole mindset? What's the end game here? Manson calls it a form of practical enlightenment. Now, this isn't about floating on a cloud of bliss and never feeling sad again. Not at all. It's about accepting that life is going to be full of failure and loss and regret. It's about becoming strong, not by avoiding pain, but by learning how to bear it. So this whole counterintuitive way of thinking really boils down to a few powerful and honestly liberating ideas. Accepting you're not special frees you from impossible expectations. Problems are a constant, so you better pick good ones. And remember that true happiness is found in the action, in the climb itself, not just in reaching the top. And so in the end, the book doesn't leave us with a neat, tidy answer. It leaves us with a much more profound and important question. Because what you're willing to struggle for is what ultimately defines who you are. So the most important question you can ask yourself is this: what pain do you want to sustain?